My mother-in-law tried to paint me as an unfit parent, so I turned the tables and proved she was an unfit grandmother instead. It started when my 3-year-old daughter, Olivia, came home from her weekend at Grandma Carol's house with a black eye. She fell down the stairs, Carol explained with that fake, concerned voice she used whenever she got caught. These things happen when children aren't properly supervised. The accusation was clear. I was a neglectful mother. My husband Ryan immediately sided with his mother. Like always, Olivia's clumsy, you know that. But Olivia wasn't clumsy, and the bruise on her eye looked exactly like fingerprints. That night, I held Olivia while she sobbed into my shoulder. "Grandma said bad words when I spilled juice," she whispered. Then she grabbed my face really hard. My blood ran cold. The next morning, Carol called Ryan at work. "I'm concerned about Olivia's safety," she said loud enough for me to hear through the phone. "Emily seems overwhelmed. Maybe Olivia should stay with us more often." Carol had been building a case against me for months, pointing out every scraped knee, every time Olivia's hair wasn't perfectly brushed, every instance where I seemed stressed or distracted. What she didn't know is that I'd started documenting everything too. When Ryan suggested Olivia spend the entire summer with his parents, I knew Carol's plan was working. "It would be good for her," he said. "And you could use the break." That's when I realized my marriage was over. But first, I had to protect my daughter. I made a decision that would change everything. The next Friday, instead of dropping Olivia off at Carol's house, I installed a hidden camera in Olivia's favorite stuffed animal, a pink bear she took everywhere. The camera was tiny, undetectable, and would record everything for 12 hours. I dropped Olivia off with my usual smile. "Have fun with Grandma, sweetheart." Carol barely looked at me. "We'll call if there are any problems," she said coldly. 12 hours later, I picked up Olivia and her bear. She was quieter than usual, but Carol seemed pleased with herself. "Olivia was much better behaved today," she announced. "She's learning proper discipline." That night, after Olivia was asleep, I connected the camera to my laptop. What I saw made me physically sick. The footage started normally. Carol giving Olivia lunch playing with toys. But as soon as Olivia spilled apple juice on her dress, Carol's demeanor changed completely. "You stupid little brat," she hissed, grabbing Olivia's arm so hard. My daughter yelped. "Just like your mother. Clumsy and worthless." I watched in horror as Carol dragged Olivia to the bathroom and forced her to stand in the corner for 2 hours. When Olivia cried, Carol screamed at her to shut up. "Nobody cares about your tears," Carol said. "Your mother doesn't want you. That's why you're here." But the worst part came when Olivia asked for water. Carol grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. "What did I tell you about asking for things? You get what I give you." Then she locked Olivia in the guest bedroom for 3 hours. I could hear my daughter sobbing through the door, begging to come out. "Please, Grandma, I'll be good." Olivia's tiny voice pleaded. "You should have thought of that before being such a brat," Carol replied through the door. When Olivia wet herself from fear, Carol made her sit in the soiled clothes as punishment. "This is what happens to bad girls," she said. "Now you know how disgusting you are." I had to pause the video multiple times to vomit. This woman had been alone with my daughter dozens of times over the past year. The footage was devastating, but I needed more than one incident to build a case that would protect Olivia permanently. The next weekend, I sent another recording device, this time sewn into Olivia's jacket. The results were even worse. Carol had invited her neighbor friend Susan over, and they spent the afternoon critiquing everything about Olivia while treating her like a science experiment. "Look at her posture," Susan said, sipping tea while Olivia stood trembling in the center of the room. "No discipline at home, obviously." "Emily doesn't know how to raise a child," Carol agreed, circling Olivia like a predator. "That's why Olivia needs to live here permanently." They made Olivia stand perfectly still in the center of the living room while they pointed out her flaws in excruciating detail. "Feet together, back straight, chin up," Carol commanded. "This is how proper young ladies stand." When Olivia's arms got tired and she dropped them slightly, Carol slapped her hands with a wooden ruler she kept specifically for these sessions. "We'll do this until you get it right," she said with cold satisfaction. "Your mother never taught you proper behavior, but I will." They made her practice for an hour and 15 minutes. Every mistake earned a sharp slap or harsh criticism. I watched my daughter's spirit break a little more with each cruel comment. "Look at those fingernails," Susan observed, leaning in close to Olivia's trembling hands. "Filthy." Emily clearly doesn't teach basic hygiene. Olivia had been gardening with me the day before, helping me plant flowers for Mother's Day. Her nails had traces of soil that I'd missed during her bath. "I've been documenting everything," Carol said proudly, pulling out a thick folder. Emily's drinking, her mood swings, Olivia's constant injuries. "The courts will see what kind of mother she really is." Susan nodded approvingly. "You're doing the right thing. That child deserves a stable home with proper guidance." "Oh, she won't be with Emily much longer," Carol replied smugly. "I'm building an airtight case. Soon, Olivia will be where she belongs, with people who know how to raise children properly." They discussed my supposed failings while forcing Olivia to stand motionless like a statue. When she shifted her weight or scratched an itch, Carol made her start the posture exercise over from the beginning. "Your mother is weak," Carol told Olivia directly, staring into her frightened eyes. "That's why you have behavioral problems. But I'll fix you. I'll make you into a proper little lady." Olivia started crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "Stop that crying this instant," Carol snapped. "Proper ladies don't cry over discipline. This is for your own good." That's when I realized the full scope of Carol's plan. She wasn't just trying to get more time with Olivia. She was systematically breaking down my daughter's self-worth while building a custody case to steal her permanently. I found her documentation the following week when Ryan asked me to pick up some papers from his parents' house for our taxes. Carol wasn't home, but Ryan's father let me into the home office. "She keeps all her important files in here," he said, gesturing to a wall of filing cabinets. "Tax stuff should be in the family folder." There in a manila folder labeled Olivia's welfare was everything. Photos of Olivia's scraped knees with timestamps and detailed descriptions. A leather-bound journal documenting every time I seemed tired or distracted. Screenshots of my Instagram posts that could be taken out of context. Even photographs of our house taken from outside with notes about unsafe conditions. She'd even written detailed reports in the style of professional assessments, complete with letterhead she'd created. Date, March 15th, 7:30 p.m. Emily appeared intoxicated at Olivia's birthday party, slurring words and stumbling. Olivia seemed embarrassed by her mother's behavior and sought comfort from other adults. Witnessed by multiple guests. I'd had one glass of wine and twisted my ankle and heels while carrying Olivia's birthday cake. Date March 22nd, 8:15 a.m. Olivia's clothes were wrinkled and mismatched, indicating neglect. Child appeared unkempt and tired, hair unbrushed, face unwashed. Emily seemed irritated when I pointed out Olivia's appearance. Olivia had dressed herself that morning while I was dealing with a work crisis, and I thought her creative outfit choices were adorable. Date, April 3rd, 2:45 p.m. Emily seems depressed and uninterested in parenting duties. Olivia seeks attention from other adults, suggesting emotional neglect at home. Child appears hungry and asks repeatedly for snacks. I'd been grieving my father's death, and Olivia was naturally social and always hungry for snacks. Date, April 10th, 4:20 p.m. found Olivia playing unsupervised near the pool area during family gathering. Emily was nowhere to be found. Child could have drowned. When confronted, Emily became defensive and angry. I'd been in the bathroom for 3 minutes, and the pool had a locked safety gate. The entries went on for pages, each one twisting normal parenting moments into evidence of my unfitness. Carol had been watching and documenting our lives for months, taking photos through our windows, timing my every move, and interpreting everything through the lens of neglect. At the bottom of the file was a business card for a family lawyer specializing in grandparents' rights, along with detailed notes about my supposed mental health issues and drinking problems. She'd even researched my medical history and found my prescription for anxiety medication after my father's death, which she documented as evidence of my instability. But there was more. I found a folder labeled character references filled with statements from people in our community. Carol had apparently been conducting a whisper campaign about my parenting for months, carefully planting seeds of doubt about my fitness as a mother. Mrs. Peterson from the church. Emily seems distracted during services. Olivia often seeks attention from other adults. The child appears to be hungry for affection, which suggests emotional neglect at home. The pediatrician's office manager. Emily appears overly anxious during appointments. Asks excessive questions that suggest she's out of her depth with normal childhood development. Olivia seems more comfortable with medical staff than with her mother. Even our mail carrier had been recruited. I've noticed that little girl plays outside alone frequently. Mother works from home but doesn't seem to supervise closely. Child has approached me several times seeking adult attention. Every normal aspect of our life had been weaponized against me. Carol had twisted Olivia's friendliness into evidence of neglect, my work-from-home schedule into negligence, and my natural parental concern into anxiety disorder. The most damning was a folder labeled professional evaluation. Carol had somehow convinced Olivia's Maplewood preschool teacher to document concerning behaviors, though I suspected the teacher had no idea how her observations would be used. Olivia exhibits anxiety around loud noises and unexpected touch, the teacher had written. She apologizes excessively for normal childhood mistakes and seems fearful of authority figures. These behaviors have become more pronounced over the past few months. These were symptoms of abuse, but Carol was presenting them as evidence that I was the abuser when in reality they were signs of Carol's own treatment of Olivia. That night, I copied everything and started planning my counterattack. I realized I was dealing with someone far more dangerous and calculating than I'd ever imagined. I researched Carol's past, something I'd never bothered to do before marriage. What I found was illuminating and terrifying. 3 previous jobs as a nanny, all ending with mysterious misunderstandings with families. A neighbor complained about her treatment of her own pets that had been dismissed due to her sterling reputation. Most damning, a sealed juvenile record for Ryan's older sister, Michelle, who I'd never met, but who Carol claimed was unstable. When I dug deeper into public records, I found a pattern. Every family Carol had worked for had experienced some kind of crisis shortly after her employment ended. One family had gone through a bitter custody battle. Another had dealt with CPS investigations. A third had seen their teenage daughter run away from home. When I asked Ryan about his sister that evening, his face went pale. Michelle doesn't talk to the family anymore. He said quietly. Mom says she's unstable. Had some kind of breakdown in State University and blamed our family for everything that went wrong in her life. What kind of breakdown? I pressed. I don't know the details. She started saying crazy things about our childhood, making up stories about Mom being abusive. The therapist said she was having false memories or something like that. This sounded disturbingly familiar. Carol's pattern was becoming clear. She created chaos and then positioned herself as the solution. When's the last time you talked to Michelle? Ryan shrugged uncomfortably. Maybe 10 years. She sent a card when Olivia was born, but Mom threw it away. Said Michelle's influence would be toxic for a new baby. I hired a private investigator to track down Michelle. She was living across the country under her married name, working as a high school teacher with 2 well-adjusted children of her own. When I called her, there was a long silence after I introduced myself. So, you finally figured out what Carol really is, she said, her voice heavy with unsurprising resignation. I've been waiting for this call for years. I'm sorry for bothering you, I began. But I need to know about your childhood with Ryan. Michelle laughed bitterly. Which version? The one Carol tells everyone, or what actually happened behind closed doors? Michelle agreed to meet me the following weekend. I flew to Denver with copies of my video evidence and Carol's documentation, desperate to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Her story was heartbreaking and familiar. Michelle lived in a modest but warm house filled with her children's artwork and family photos. She was nothing like the unstable woman Carol had described. She broke my arm when I was Olivia's age, Michelle said, showing me medical records she'd kept in a safety deposit box for over 20 years. Told everyone I fell off my bike. The doctor was suspicious. The break was consistent with someone grabbing and twisting. But Carol was so convincing. She cried and talked about how clumsy I was, how difficult it was to keep me safe. The pattern was clear. Carol had abused Ryan and Michelle throughout their childhood, then convinced everyone she was the perfect mother when they struggled with the trauma. The psychological abuse was worse than the physical, Michelle continued, her voice steady, but her hands shaking slightly. She had me convinced I was crazy, that my memories couldn't be trusted. She'd do horrible things to me, then the next day act like nothing had happened. When I'd try to tell my father or a teacher, she'd produce evidence that I was lying, fake diary entries she'd written in my handwriting, photos that seemed to contradict my story. Michelle showed me her own documentation, medical records spanning her childhood, therapy notes from State University, even a recording she'd secretly made of Carol berating her during a phone call years ago. "Listen to this," she said, playing the audio. Carol's voice was venomous, calling Michelle a pathological liar who was trying to destroy the family out of jealousy. This was from when I was 22 and trying to get help. Ryan blocked it all out. Michelle explained he had to survive. She convinced him that I was jealous of their relationship, that I was mentally ill and trying to destroy the family with lies. He was her golden child, as long as he never questioned her version of reality. "How did you break free?" I asked. "I didn't talk to them for 5 years. Got intensive therapy. Built a life away from her influence. When I met my husband, I had to learn what normal relationships looked like. It took years to trust my own memories and feelings." She looked at my videos with growing horror and recognition. "This is exactly what she did to us," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The isolation, the criticism, the way she makes the child feel responsible for the abuse she's doing to Olivia, what she did to me." "Will you help me?" I asked. "I've been waiting 20 years for someone to ask," she replied. Michelle provided me with detailed documentation of Carol's abuse pattern, including the names of the families she'd worked for and the chaos that had followed her employment. Together, we built a comprehensive picture of a woman who systematically destroyed families while positioning herself as their savior. Armed with Michelle's testimony and documentation, I returned home and confronted Ryan directly. "Your mother is abusing Olivia," I said, showing him the videos. He watched in stunned silence as Carol screamed at our daughter, locked her in rooms, and made her stand in wet clothes. I could see him struggling with cognitive dissonance. The loving mother he remembered fighting against the evidence in front of his eyes. "This isn't real," he whispered, his face pale. "You edited this somehow." "Mom would never call your sister," I said, handing him Michelle's phone number. The conversation lasted 3 hours. I could hear Michelle's voice through the phone, gentle but firm, walking Ryan through memories he'd buried deep. She reminded him of incidents from their childhood, times when he'd hidden in closets, nights when he'd wet the bed from fear. The way Carol would hurt Michelle and then comfort him afterward, making him complicit in the abuse. When he hung up, he was sobbing like a broken child. "I remember now," he said through his tears. "I remember hiding in the closet when she'd lose her temper. I remember Michelle trying to protect me, taking the blame for things I did. I remember being so afraid of making her angry." He looked at me with broken eyes. "How could I have let her near Olivia? How could I not have seen it?" "Because you were conditioned not to see it," I said gently. "She spent your entire childhood training you to doubt your own perceptions, just like she's conditioning Olivia now." The next morning, Ryan called his mother with shaking hands. "Olivia won't be staying with you anymore," he said simply. Carol's reaction was immediate and explosive. "How dare you keep my granddaughter from me?" She screamed loud enough for me to hear across the room. "You're both unfit parents. I have documentation proving it. I'll take that child away from you if it's the last thing I do." "We know what you've been doing," Ryan said quietly. "I've been protecting that child from your wife's neglect." Carol hissed. "Emily is mentally unstable, just like your sister. Olivia deserves a real family who can give her proper guidance and discipline." "We are protecting her," Ryan said, his voice growing stronger from you. "You've poisoned him against me," Carol spat into the phone. "Just like that psychotic sister of his filled his head with lies. I won't let you destroy another family. I have evidence, Ryan. Evidence that will show everyone what kind of mother Emily really is." She hung up and immediately called her lawyer. 2 days later, we received papers. Carol was filing for emergency custody, claiming Olivia was in immediate danger from neglect and abuse at home. Her petition was a masterpiece of manipulation filled with lies and twisted truths that painted me as a dangerous, unstable mother and Ryan as an absent, neglectful father. She claimed I was an alcoholic who drank during the day while caring for Olivia. She said Ryan traveled constantly for work and showed no interest in parenting. She alleged that Olivia showed signs of severe physical and emotional abuse, including unexplained injuries, behavioral problems, and fear of her own parents. She attached photos of Olivia's normal childhood injuries: scraped knees from learning to ride a bike, a bump on her forehead from running into a table, a bruise on her shin from playground equipment, as evidence of our failure to protect her. Each photo was accompanied by detailed descriptions that made normal childhood accidents sound like evidence of abuse. The petition also included professional opinions from people in our community. Carol had somehow convinced several people to sign statements about my supposed unfitness as a mother, carefully wording their concerns to sound damning without being overtly false. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, giving me very little time to prepare a defense against years of careful planning on Carol's part. I spent those days working with our lawyer, Michael Lee, a family attorney who specialized in defending against false allegations. He was a soft-spoken man with kind eyes who had seen cases like this before. "This is more common than you'd think," he told me during our first meeting. Abusive grandparents often project their own behavior onto the parents they're trying to discredit. They build false cases over months or years, carefully documenting normal parenting struggles as evidence of abuse. I compiled my video evidence, Michelle's testimony, Carol's employment history, and medical records showing the pattern of abuse across generations. Most importantly, I arranged for Olivia to be interviewed by Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, a child psychologist who specialized in abuse cases. The interview with Dr. Hayes was heartbreaking. Olivia, who had always been chatty and outgoing, became quiet and withdrawn when asked about her grandmother. She drew pictures that no 3-year-old should be able to draw, images of fear and powerlessness that spoke to trauma beyond her years. Olivia's exhibiting classic signs of emotional abuse, Dr. Hayes told me after the session. But she's also showing remarkable resilience. "You've done a good job creating a safe environment for her to process what she's experienced." The hearing was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The courtroom was packed with Carol's supporters, people from her church, neighbors, family, friends who had no idea what she was really like behind closed doors. Carol arrived with her lawyer, dressed in a conservative navy suit that made her look like the perfect grandmother. She'd even brought tissues and kept them prominently displayed on the table, ready for her performance. She testified tearfully about Olivia's concerning behaviors and my obvious neglect, painting herself as a reluctant whistleblower who had tried everything to help before resorting to legal action. "That child is crying out for help," she said, dabbing her eyes with practiced precision. "She comes to my house anxious and fearful. When I try to comfort her, she flinches as if she's been hit. I've tried to work with Emily to offer support and guidance, but she becomes defensive and angry whenever I express concern." Her lawyer presented their evidence methodically. The photos, the documentation, character witnesses who testified to Carol's wonderful reputation as a grandmother and pillar of the community. The pediatrician's office manager took the stand. "Mrs. Davis always accompanies Olivia to appointments. She asks thoughtful questions and clearly cares about the child's well-being. Emily seems distracted and overwhelmed, always asking about normal childhood developments, as if she doesn't understand her own child." Mrs. Peterson from church testified, "Carol is devoted to that little girl. She's always talking about Olivia's development and expressing concern about the home environment. She's mentioned several times that she's worried about Olivia's safety. Even our neighbor spoke against me. Olivia spends a lot of time outside unsupervised. I've seen her playing near the street while Emily is inside working on her computer. The child often approaches adults in the neighborhood seeking attention. Carol's lawyer painted a picture of a caring grandmother trying to save her grandchild from neglectful parents who were too proud or damaged to accept help. My client has reluctantly come forward, the lawyer said in closing, because she fears for Olivia's safety. The evidence shows a clear pattern of neglect and possible abuse. Olivia deserves a stable, loving home with adults who can provide proper care and guidance. I watched the judge's face during Carol's presentation, trying to read his expression. He seemed sympathetic to her story, nodding along with her testimony. My heart sank as I realized how convincing she was, how perfectly she'd crafted her case. Then it was our turn. Michael Lee stood slowly and addressed the court with quiet confidence. Your Honor, we're here today because the petitioner has systematically abused her granddaughter while building a false case against the child's loving parents. What you're about to see will shock you, but it represents the truth about Carol Morrison. He played the first video. The courtroom went completely silent as Carol's real voice filled the room, harsh and cruel in a way that contrasted sharply with her gentle testimony. You stupid little brat, just like your mother, clumsy and worthless. I watched Carol's face as her own words played back. For just a moment, her mask slipped and I saw pure rage flash across her features before she composed herself again. We played clip after clip, Carol screaming at Olivia, grabbing her roughly, locking her in rooms, making cruel comments about her granddaughter's appearance and behavior. The contrast between the woman on the witness stand and the woman in the videos was jarring. The judge's expression grew darker with each video, his earlier sympathy evaporating as he watched Carol's systematic abuse of a 3-year-old child. Your Honor, Carol's lawyer stammered. These videos are clearly edited or taken out of context. My client was attempting to provide discipline and structure. Are you claiming this is not your client's voice? Michael asked. The lawyer had no response. The videos were clearly unedited, showing continuous footage of Carol's abuse. We played the audio of Carol discussing her plan to take custody with her friend Susan. Her cruel comments about Olivia's supposed defects. Her systematic emotional abuse designed to break a 3-year-old spirit. The room was silent except for the sound of Carol sobbing on the recording. Not tears of remorse, but frustrated rage at a child who wouldn't conform to her impossible demands. Then Michelle took the stand. She testified about her childhood with calm composure, speaking clearly about decades of abuse while maintaining her dignity. She showed the court medical records spanning years, injuries that couldn't be explained by normal childhood accidents, emergency room visits where doctors had noted suspicious patterns. My mother is very good at appearing concerned, Michelle said, looking directly at Carol. But behind closed doors, she's a predator who systematically targets the most vulnerable family members. She destroyed my childhood, convinced everyone I was mentally ill when I tried to get help, and now she's doing the same thing to Olivia. Carol's lawyer attempted to discredit Michelle during cross-examination, suggesting she was unstable and seeking attention. Ma'am, isn't it true that you've been estranged from your family for years due to mental health issues? Michelle smiled sadly. I've been estranged from my abuser for years due to her mental health issues. There's a significant difference. The child psychologist testified next, presenting Olivia's drawings and explaining their significance. Olivia displays classic signs of emotional abuse. Dr. Hayes said she flinches when touched unexpectedly, apologizes constantly for normal behavior, and shows severe anxiety around authority figures. She presented Olivia's artwork from their sessions. When asked to draw her family, Olivia had drawn herself, her parents, and several friends in bright colors. When asked specifically about her grandmother, Olivia had drawn disturbing pictures. A large angry face with sharp teeth hovering over a small figure, a little girl locked in a box, a woman with claws reaching for a crying child. The child described feeling scared and confused at her grandmother's house. Dr. Hayes continued, she believes she's bad and that's why these things happen to her. This kind of self-blame is typical in abuse victims who are too young to understand that they're not responsible for adult behavior. In your professional opinion, Michael asked, who poses a threat to this child's well-being? Absolutely the grandmother, Dr. Hayes replied without hesitation. Olivia shows no signs of abuse in her primary home. Her parents have created a secure, loving environment where she can express herself freely. The trauma symptoms only appear in relation to visits with the petitioner. Carol's lawyer had no meaningful questions for any of our witnesses. The evidence was overwhelming. Finally, Michael presented Carol's employment history, the pattern of families who terminated her services under mysterious circumstances, the neighbor complaints that had been dismissed due to her reputation, the systematic way she'd built false cases against Olivia's parents while abusing the child herself. Your Honor, Michael concluded, this is not a custody case. This is a criminal matter. The petitioner has committed systematic child abuse while attempting to steal a child from her loving parents through fraudulent legal proceedings. The judge took a brief recess to review the evidence, then returned with a stern expression. This petition is not only denied in its entirety, but I'm issuing an immediate restraining order, he said, looking directly at Carol. Mrs. Carol Morrison is prohibited from any contact with the minor child, directly or indirectly, for a period of no less than 10 years. He turned to the court clerk. Please ensure law enforcement is notified of this order immediately and that copies are sent to the child's elementary school and daycare providers. Then he looked back at Carol, whose face had transformed from white to red with barely contained rage. Your behavior, as documented in these recordings, constitutes clear evidence of systematic child abuse. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for immediate criminal prosecution. Additionally, I'm ordering a full investigation into your past employment as a caregiver, and I'm recommending that your name be added to child abuse registries to prevent future employment with children. Carol couldn't contain herself any longer. She exploded out of her chair. This is ridiculous, she screamed. I'm the only one who truly cares about that child. These people have poisoned her against me with their lies and manipulation. Ma'am, the judge said firmly, you will sit down and remain silent or I will hold you in contempt of court. Carol's lawyer grabbed her arm and tried to force her back into her seat, but she continued ranting. That child is in danger. Emily is mentally unstable, just like Ryan's sister. Olivia needs proper guidance and discipline, not this permissive nonsense that's ruining her. Baif, the judge called. As the baif approached, Carol finally sat down, but her mask had completely slipped. The gentle grandmother act was gone, replaced by the cruel, controlling woman I'd seen in the videos. The judge continued. I've been on this bench for 15 years and I've rarely seen such clear evidence of systematic child abuse disguised as concern. The petitioner's actions represent a danger not just to this child, but potentially to other children in the community. He paused, looking around the courtroom at Carol's supporters, many of whom now looked shocked and confused. I want to be very clear about what happened here today. This was not a case of a loving grandmother expressing legitimate concerns. This was a predator using the legal system to continue her abuse of a child while attempting to discredit the very parents who were protecting that child from harm. Carol sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that her perfect plan had not only failed, but destroyed her completely. But I wasn't done. Outside the courthouse, I handed copies of the videos to the local news station and several national media outlets that covered stories about child abuse. Carol's carefully crafted reputation in our small town evaporated overnight. The story ran on the evening news with the headline, "Respected Grandmother Caught Abusing Toddler on Hidden Camera." They interviewed Dr. Hayes about signs of child abuse, showed selected clips from the recordings with Olivia's identity protected, and discussed how predators often present themselves as concerned caregivers. Within hours, the story had spread to social media and picked up by larger news outlets. Carol's book club issued a statement, distancing themselves from her. Her church asked her to step down from all ministries involving children. Neighbors who had praised her parenting skills for decades suddenly remembered concerning incidents they'd previously ignored or dismissed. 3 other families came forward with their own stories about Carol's babysitting. Children who'd returned home upset or injured, explanations that hadn't quite made sense, their own gut feelings that something was wrong, but that they'd dismissed because of Carol's sterling reputation. One mother, Jessica Miller, shared her story on local news. My daughter, Olivia, also named Olivia, coincidentally, was 7 when Carol babysat for us. She came home one night and said Carol made her stand in the corner for hours because she couldn't tie her shoes fast enough. When I asked Carol about it, she said Olivia was exaggerating and that children often make up stories to avoid consequences. I believed her because everyone said she was wonderful with kids. Another family revealed that their son had been afraid to stay with Carol after she forced him to eat food he was allergic to as discipline for being too picky. They'd switched babysitters but never reported the incident because they doubted their child's version of events. The criminal case moved swiftly with video evidence, multiple witnesses, and Carol's outburst in court. The district attorney had an airtight case. Carol initially tried to fight the charges, claiming the videos were edited and that she was the victim of a conspiracy. But when faced with the overwhelming evidence, including expert analysis confirming the videos were authentic, she had no choice but to accept a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to child endangerment, filing false reports, and perjury. She received 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, mandatory psychological counseling, and a permanent ban from working with children in any capacity. The judge also ordered her to pay for Olivia's therapy and issued a lifetime restraining order that extended to any future children in our family. Your actions have traumatized an innocent child and violated the sacred trust between a grandparent and grandchild. The judge told her during sentencing, "You used your position of authority and respect in the community to systematically abuse a vulnerable child while attempting to destroy her family through fraudulent legal proceedings." Carol stood silently during sentencing, no longer bothering with her concerned grandmother act. The mask was permanently off. Ryan struggled deeply with the revelations about his mother, but he remained committed to protecting Olivia and processing his own trauma. We started family counseling together, working with a therapist who specialized in generational abuse patterns. I spent my entire life believing her version of events. He said during one particularly difficult session, "She convinced me that Michelle was crazy, that my memories couldn't be trusted, that questioning her meant I was being disloyal to family." Survivors often protect their abusers, our therapist explained patiently. It's a psychological defense mechanism that helps children survive trauma. You are conditioned from birth to prioritize your mother's emotions over your own safety and perceptions. Ryan worked incredibly hard to deprogram years of manipulation and gaslighting. He started having regular phone calls with Michelle, rebuilding their relationship and processing their shared trauma. Watching him reconnect with his sister was beautiful. They had so much healing to do together. Olivia also started therapy specifically designed for young trauma survivors in age-appropriate ways. She learned that adults shouldn't hurt children, that it's okay to tell the truth about scary things, and that she was loved unconditionally regardless of her behavior. Her progress was remarkable. The night terrors stopped within a month. She started laughing freely again. The spontaneous, joyful laughter of a child who feels safe. The constant apologizing faded as she learned that making mistakes was normal and wouldn't result in punishment or rejection. Grandma Carol was sick in her heart. Olivia told me one day while we were coloring together, "But you and Daddy keep me safe now." 6 months after the trial, we moved across the country for Ryan's job transfer. A fresh start away from Carol's lingering influence and the small-town gossip that never quite dies. Even after truth comes to light, Olivia thrived immediately in her Sunny Acres preschool. She made friends easily and showed no signs of the anxiety and hypervigilance that had characterized her behavior during the abuse period. Her new teacher, Mrs. Garcia, pulled me aside after the first week. "Olivia is such a confident, happy child," she said with genuine warmth. "She speaks up for herself, shows real empathy for others, and has wonderful emotional regulation for her age. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." If only she knew what we'd been through to get Olivia to this healthy place. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed in our new house, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes that had seemed too much for her age. "Mommy, why was Grandma Carol so mean to me?" I chose my words carefully, as I always did when discussing the past. Some people have sickness in their hearts that makes them want to hurt others, especially people who are smaller and can't protect themselves, I said gently. But that was never ever your fault. You're a wonderful little girl who deserves only kindness and love. She nodded solemnly, processing this in her 3-year-old way. I'm glad she can't hurt me anymore. She can't, I promised, stroking her hair. And she never will again. 2 years later, Carol violated her restraining order by showing up at Olivia's new elementary school. Somehow, having tracked down our location, a vigilant teacher spotted her lurking near the playground during recess and immediately called police and administration. She was arrested within minutes and charged with violating a protective order and attempted child abduction. This time there was no plea deal. She spent 8 months in jail and was released only to be immediately transferred to a psychiatric facility for evaluation. When she was finally released, she moved to another state entirely. We haven't heard from her since, though our lawyer maintains a standing order to be notified if she ever attempts to contact us or locate our whereabouts. Ryan and I eventually divorced 2 years after the trial. The trauma had damaged our relationship too deeply to repair despite our best efforts in counseling. We both carried too much guilt. Him for not protecting Olivia from his mother, me for not recognizing the signs sooner. But we co-parent successfully, united in our commitment to Olivia's well-being. She feels secure and loved between both of our homes. And we've both done extensive work to ensure we never repeat the patterns we learned in our own childhoods. Olivia is 8 now, confident and happy. She participates in multiple activities, has close friendships, and shows no lasting effects from Carol's abuse. She doesn't remember much about her grandmother anymore, which is exactly how we wanted it. Her child psychologist says this is normal and healthy. Young children often don't retain detailed memories of trauma if they're removed from the situation quickly and given proper support to heal. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about destroying Carol's reputation and family relationships. I don't, not even a little bit. She made her choices when she decided to hurt a defenseless child. She chose to systematically abuse Olivia while building a false case against me. She chose to use the legal system as a weapon to continue her abuse. I simply made sure everyone knew who she really was. The ripple effects of exposing Carol went far beyond our immediate family. The state launched a comprehensive investigation into her past employment and found a disturbing pattern of complaints that had been dismissed or buried because of her sterling reputation in the community. New legislation was passed requiring enhanced background checks for private caregivers and mandatory reporting training for all child care providers. Teachers and doctors received additional training on recognizing emotional abuse disguised as discipline or concern. Carol's case became a textbook example in child psychology courses about how predators use their reputation and social standing to access victims. Several universities now use our case study to train future social workers and family lawyers. Most importantly, Olivia grew up knowing that she's valued and protected. She speaks up confidently when something bothers her. She sets appropriate boundaries with adults. She knows she deserves kindness and respect from everyone in her life. Carol tried to break Olivia's spirit and steal her identity as a loved, worthy child. Instead, she made Olivia stronger and more resilient. Last month, Olivia came home from school excited about a new friend whose grandmother had visited their class. Her grandma seems really nice, Olivia said brightly. She brought homemade cookies for everyone and read us stories. She didn't yell at anybody or make mean faces. I'm grateful that Olivia has positive examples of what healthy family relationships look like. She deserves grandparents who celebrate her achievements, encourage her dreams, and love her unconditionally, not ones who try to destroy her sense of self-worth for their own psychological satisfaction. Olivia still has one set of loving grandparents, my parents, who moved closer to us after everything happened. They shower her with appropriate affection and create the positive memories that every child deserves. They've also been incredibly supportive of Ryan, welcoming him as a true son-in-law even after our divorce. Carol thought she could use my daughter as a weapon against me, positioning herself as the savior while painting me as an unfit mother. She believed her reputation and careful documentation would be enough to steal Olivia away from her loving family. Instead, I used her own cruelty as a weapon against her. The truth was more powerful than all her lies and manipulation. The best revenge was simply letting Carol reveal who she really was. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts and installed that camera. How long would Carol's abuse have continued? How much psychological damage would she have inflicted on Olivia's developing sense of self? The thought terrifies me, but I'm grateful every day that I acted when I did. Olivia knows she's loved, protected, and valued exactly as she is. She knows that adults who truly care about children don't hurt them, manipulate them, or try to turn them against their parents. She knows that when someone tries to harm her, there are people who will fight fiercely to keep her safe. Most importantly, she's learned that her voice matters. That speaking up about uncomfortable situations is not only okay, but necessary. This lesson will serve her well throughout her life. That's a lesson worth all the pain we went through to learn it. And that's how I knew that protecting Olivia was worth destroying Carol's entire facade of respectability. The truth always wins in the end.